Hey guys, Tom Barclay here outside Tottenham Hotspur's stadium after another bad defeat for Ange Postecoglou and Tottenham. They lost at home to Leicester. Leicester, who had lost their previous 7 league games. This was, as Ange actually put it himself in his press conference, so to speak, a new low for Spurs this season, or the lowest I think he puts it as. And I have to agree. I thought Everton first half was the worst defeat. It's definitely the worst half of Postecoglou's tenure, but this is potentially the worst loss so far. Really demoralising given the quality of opposition, or lack of quality, given the perilous form that Leicester have been in, and not just the fact they lost 7 games in a row. They only scored 2 goals during that period, but they somehow won 2-1 here. Obviously Tottenham got a multitude of injuries, of which there were more here for that ahead of the game. James Maddison missing out through soreness, Charlison coming off after 54 minutes, apparently due to his groin, which was flaring up at half time. But even with all the injuries, this was a really, really bad loss for Postecoglou, a really bad loss for Tottenham, and one that genuinely, even though it hasn't actually changed anything from a points difference to the relegation zone, it still remains 8 points. When you look at the form that they're in and how hard it is to just turn it on, even when you've got your players back in this division, I don't think a relegation battle can be ruled out. We were sort of laughing at it before, not laughing, but sort of kind of, suggesting it, but not really thinking it was the case. And I don't actually think Spurs will get relegated, but I don't think we can. I think we're going a step beyond saying this is just relegation form, but they'll be fine. This is 24 points from 23 games. This is really, really poor for a club of Tottenham Hotspur's size, and there are a multitude of factors behind it. But we're focusing on the game itself at the moment. As he said, Ange, it feels like a new low. It does feel like the nadir of his time in charge, and one where I guess there are genuine question marks over whether he can sort of rise from this rock bottom position and come storming back once the players come back or not. And he was even asked something about that in the press conference, and I'll come on to those comments about how he feels about his sort of position, really. But let's just go through the game. So, to be honest, it felt like 2 sides that were poor sides. One in particular in Tottenham who looked knackered and short on quality and confidence, and one that just looked a poor team full of, in my mind, players who are more fitting to the Championship. In Leicester, lacking confidence, but they still have wily Jamie Vardy up front, who's an absolute icon of the Premier League era, a Premier League legend, and at 38 still going strong and still causing Tottenham problems. So you can never rule them out, particularly the way that Spurs give up opportunities. But the first half an hour, I'd say, was really dire, really poor fare in miserable weather out here. It's cold, it's windy, it's rainy, it's just miserable in London right now in January. Everyone's sort of had enough of the winter, and there's still ages to go, particularly in Tottenham, given how badly it's gone. And then Spurs go and produce the sort of one moment of quality to take the lead with a beautiful ball in from Porro, who has had a difficult season like a lot of Spurs players, but when he gets his delivery right, he's got an absolute wonder of a right foot. Beautiful ball in, and Richarlison, fair play to him, so leading the line here after all his injury issues, does well enough to sort of get his body in the right position, fire a header in. It's close range, but it's not as easy as it might look. He did well to convert that, and it sort of underlined his threat in the air, which he's had throughout his career, and actually more so at Tottenham than any other club. I suppose maybe at Everton he was playing more off the left, but because he's played more centre forward at times for Spurs, when he has played, and it's so rare that he has because of injuries, his threat in the air is a real asset and something that Spurs really missed, and I thought he was pretty good from there. But Tottenham didn't exactly sort of kick on from their lead, and they went to half time, and I don't know, I think any other club you'd be thinking, given Leicester's form, Spurs will probably go on comfortably, sort of dig out a sort of 1-0, 2-0 win, but this is Tottenham, this is Postecoglou's Tottenham really, throughout most of his tenure, and particularly during this season where they're so short. Obviously played just the other night in Hoffenheim. It feels like only days ago I was on, literally it was 2 days ago I was coming back from there, and a gruelling schedule that they've got right now, and it's starting to tell, but that doesn't really excuse how quickly they turn around after half time. They've just had the break to sort of rest their weary legs, and within a minute of the second half Vardy has equalised. Bobby Decordova-Reid, a player that I've watched and interviewed over the years, watched loads of times, his time at Fulham and Bristol City before then, a sort of kind of seasoned campaigner, always gives everything, but this apparently was only his first start under Van Nistelrooy, so Van Nistelrooy sort of turning to the older senior players during his own issues that he's had, trying to keep Leicester in the league, which I'm not going to go into, but is sort of a side point to this match, their own problems, what this win can do for them. Puts in a really good ball, to be fair, low ball, which kind of evades Ben Davies' slide challenge, also evades Kinski's sort of rush out to try and palm it away, and there's Vardy, gets a chance to take a touch and just fires in close range, and then does exactly what he did in the opening of the season when Leicester drew against Tottenham. Tottenham absolutely battered them in the first half, only had a 1-goal lead, and then ended up drawing the game when Vardy equalised. It could have been worse, and Vardy then, in a classic sort of, as we say, shithouse kind of approach to modern day football, pointed to his Premier League badge on his arm, pointed to them to say basically, look, I've won one Premier League compared to Tottenham who've won none, which is an undeniable fact, I suppose, as much as it might pain Spurs fans to hear it. And he did the same thing again at that point. So that was 1-1, but that wasn't the end of it. In fact, Leicester only took another 4 minutes before making it 2-1. The ball comes to Bilal El Khanous, who I think is one of the players under Van Nistelrooy's tenure who's sort of emerged as one of the exciting young players. But he gets the ball in the middle of the field, and this is something that's been a regular problem for Tottenham, I think, under Postecoglou, is how easy it's been for teams to play through their midfield. Just whoever's been in there, really. They've just been a very easy team to get at and play through. And you can say what you want about Radu Dragozin and all the other centre-backs or defenders who might perhaps sometimes do better in one-on-one situations, but the fact is they get exposed time and time again to one-on-one situations because the midfield are too easy to play through. It is part of Postecoglou's approach. He's this risk and reward kind of manager who tries to who sees that risk being worth it, kind of like playing out from the back the way he wants to, for the benefits when it works. But unfortunately, the way it's going, it isn't working enough. And it's a really nice finish from the edge of the area, no doubt. And that's the way it's going for Spurs right now when you've got players sort of taking their chances like that. But the fact that he had so much room to sort of pick his spot underlines the issues that Spurs' midfield in particular has had most of the season. So that was 2-1. Spurs had a couple of chances after that. Pedro Porro had a deflected free kick which hit the bar. And he had one moment where he was racing through down the right and just had to square it for Archie Gray, but instead went for a strike from a really acute angle which crashed into the side netting. And at that point, the Spurs fans were giving him abuse, well, not abuse, but just shouting at him after that. Like, why were you doing that? I think I saw Vicario sitting down on watching the game. He seemed to be looking, incredulous as well at that decision that Porro had taken. Gray in the middle just couldn't believe he hadn't had ball squared to him. But it was, it's just one chance, and it was a decision that Porro made. You can't pin this all on him at all. But I guess the most damning fact, and sort of underlines how tired the team look, is after that, there's probably another 20 minutes, half an hour to go after that, and they Spurs didn't really have a chance. Leicester were relatively comfortable. This is a Leicester side, like I said, who was 7 on the bounce. So it's just no real sort of defence, I suppose, apart from looking at the injuries, which are an obvious factor. I mean, Postecoglou pointed out in his pre-match press conference saying, sometimes you can go out, the analogy which I quite enjoyed actually, to be honest, where you can say, go outside, it's a really sunny day, and say, God, it's bright. It might not be the sun, but it's the sun. It's the sun that did it, that there's no denying that sometimes it's the obvious answer is the reason, and that's what he's saying. He's saying it's injuries. And I don't think you cannot have a conversation about his team without saying it's a massive factor. It is. It just is a massive factor. It's whether you think it's enough of a factor to excuse these consistently bad results. Particularly when you're playing against a game at home to a team like Leicester. He would argue that it's just because the names on the team sheet are better and a better quality. We don't know how tired some of these players are, and I guess there's a fair point in that, but there's no denying that it's a major, major issue. When you have a performance like this, and there's a reason why fans were getting frustrated. But what was interesting from the fans' response, I didn't hear any Postecoglou out or anything like that. It all got turned towards Daniel Levy, the chairman, who's copying more and more flack with every passing week with these results. I think Spurs fans are sort of, in their mind, the way they see it, after 24 years and 16 managers, 1 trophy, as a banner which was unveiled at the end pointed out, that there's a common denominator factor. They feel that it's the decision making at the top, and changing the manager again, what difference will it make is what they see. They want change. Like, I've seen a lot of clubs be in a situation where there's a lot of bad feeling towards the ownership, and you always think, well, what do you actually expect? You really think they're just going to sell up and leave? How often does that actually happen? And if anything, ENIC recently increased marginally their ownership of this club. So unless something happens dramatically, and I suppose it would come out of nowhere, to be fair, I don't really know where that goes, to be honest. But I understand the sort of will from the people, from the fans in that regard. But I think there is a sort of thought process around Postecoglou and the injuries, that if there was a change, A, who are you going to get in, and B, they're going to have the same problems right now. There's time ticking away the transfer window. It doesn't look like at the moment there's going to be anything major happening, but we'll see. Maybe there's a rabbit out of the hat right at the end. Postecoglou himself in his press conference talked about how, I'm sort of jumping ahead here, but he said even one more player coming in just in the short term will give us an opportunity. So he has not really pushed it too far when it comes to his comments over new signings the way Conte would. He's talked consistently about players need to be helped. That's about as far as he's gone, apart from in the embargo section on Friday. He said they're playing with fire a little bit if they don't bring anyone in. And he also said to when my question, when we were out in Hoffenheim in the pre-match, that there was a chance that nobody could come in. So I think he's pushing it as far as he can. I don't think he's going to go out and be publicly critical, because the situation he's in performance-wise and in the league table, I do think that could be curtains if he did that. So I understand why he's not doing that. But even he is dropping subtle hints here and there. But we have to wait and see, what actually happens. But at this stage, I wouldn't hang your hat on it. And that's worrying for Spurs. And also, back to the sort of relegation point, whether they're actually genuine the relegation battle. Not just playing with fire over Tottenham's sort of hopes this season. But if suddenly, the league table goes the way it's going, a few more bad defeats, they lose away to Brentford, and suddenly that gap is cut from 7 points to 4 or 3, and more injuries come if they do, because they haven't got a big enough squad and players are playing at capacity, and maybe players who come back get always ifs, buts and maybes, but based on what we've seen so far, re-injury cannot be ruled out. It's happened quite a lot. I'm kind of doing a bit of a doomsday scenario, but suddenly not bringing anyone in, not just to support Postecoglou, but to make sure of Tottenham's league status, feels like an important thing to happen. So a few days left, let's see what happens, but you can feel the frustration from the supporters here at Tottenham, at the way the club is acting this month in particular. So that is something that feels like it's just going to it's just going to continue until things really turn around. And I guess to sort of end this conversation, he talks about Postecoglou's comments. First of all, on Richarlison, I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but I asked why he came off on 54 minutes. It presumed it was because of trying to look after him, but they were 2-1 down. He needed a goal to the goal scorer off, and he said it was his feeling of scoring at half time. You could tell that he wasn't running properly, so took him off at that point. But Ange was saying, he was asked whether, he said he'd made the point that in the next 10 days, 2 weeks, things are going to ease up with players coming back. But then he was asked after that, do you feel you'll get that time? Essentially, will you still be here 10 days, 2 weeks? And his answer was, who knows? There's a bit more to it, but he essentially was admitting, in the way that he does, he's always a very honest guy over this kind of thing. He's not going to beat around the bush, but that he's not sure. He doesn't know. And at this point, we're not sure exactly what's going to happen. He also said, but he did, as I say, from the off, admit that this was like a new low, effectively, for a result. But he does still reiterate the point that he's made consistently, that once the players come back, Van der Ven and Romero are very, not far away. They're the players that you'd look at in that 10-day, 2-week period in particular, who are the obvious candidates to be the ones coming back. That amazing things can still happen this season. That they can still win something, obviously, with the League Cup and the Cup competitions, which obviously we know this completely hangs on. He was asked also about, how the strength of feeling in the crowd was directed at one person, i.e. Levy, rather than himself. And part of Ange's answer to that, it was kind of sad, really. He was sort of basically saying he really wanted to come in and have this sort of unifying effect to this club. And, move the club past all this, because we've seen it over for years, really, ever since I've been covering it. Every time things go wrong, Levy's the one who gets the blame from the fans. And Postecoglou genuinely seems like he wanted to sort of unify that whole thing, but he said it's not working out right now. And it does feel like, if it were to work out, it's a long way off. So much water under the bridge, I guess. But the fact of the matter is, there are still games ahead in this season which can be... It's hard to see it right now, and that was kind of the point he was making. That it's hard to see how it can get better and how that opportunity is still there, and Tottenham can still do something amazing this season, which, winning say they stay up, they finish 15th, but they win the League Cup. That would probably, would that be better than finishing 7th? Finishing Europa Conference League, or even Europa League, or even maybe Champions League? Like, for some fans it would be. And maybe people can look back on this season and go, that was just crazy with the amount of injuries. But right now, the idea of thinking that far ahead seems foolhardy, and you just generally worry about Postecoglou right now after this particular result. Like I say, the worst result, I think, so far under his tenure, and in this miserable winter, this miserable January. I thought December was bad, but this is bad. One win in 11 games now in the league. Southampton was the only victory, who do him 6 points, so they can't beat them. But then we say that about Leicester, and that's where they're at now. I guess nothing gets boring around Tottenham. There'll be a lot going on in the next few weeks, and there's a lot of pressure for a player to come through the door, at least in the transfer window, and whether they do or not remains to be seen, I guess. It's hard to really sort of know what to sort of sum it up, but I suppose my thoughts are, come back to that point about relegation. I just think it's like, I don't think it will happen, but I don't think we can sort of joke about it now. There's no laughing about this situation anymore, really, after this. If there was in the first place, after this result, it was a really sombre afternoon, and you do worry about what lies ahead for everyone involved, really. Anyway, I'll be doing a video after or before the Elfsborg press conference. I imagine some stuff might happen in between then, so maybe I'll do videos in between them, but we'll see. But yeah, in the meantime, I guess keep your chin up, all Spurs fans, after that. But yeah, it was pretty grim, just like this weather, pretty grim out there. Cheers, guys.